A guy DM'd me on Instagram to ask me out. I asked how much he made and he said minimum wage. Why don't men understand that with minimum wage they don't deserve to go out or have a girlfriend? I have always believed that life is a curated experience, and my Instagram feed is a reflection of that standard. I spend a significant amount of money on my aesthetic, from my monthly biopolymer nail extensions to my signature gold leaf lattes at the most exclusive cafe in the city. People don't realize that maintaining a high-value presence is a full-time job that requires a specific level of investment. I'm not being conceited. I'm still aware of my market value in a world that rewards excellence. When I receive DMs from strangers, I usually ignore them unless their profile suggests they can keep up with my pace. My time is literally money, and I refuse to waste it on someone who can't even afford the valet parking at the places I frequent. A few days ago, this guy named Julian messaged me with a generic, "Hey, I'd love to take you out sometime," followed by a heart eye emoji. I took one look at his profile and felt an immediate sense of pity for his lack of ambition. His photos were all grainy shots of him hiking or eating at basic chain restaurants that I wouldn't even step foot in for a bathroom break. There was no sign of a designer watch, no steering wheel shots of a European car, and certainly no luxury travel highlights. Still, I decided to give him a chance to prove his worth because I'm a fair person who believes in transparency. I didn't want to waste a perfectly good outfit on a mediocre date that would end in a split bill. I decided to skip the small talk and get straight to the logistics of our potential relationship by asking the only question that matters. I asked him point blank what his annual income was and what his current position at work entailed. Julian seemed a bit taken aback, but he replied saying he worked as a junior technician and earned roughly the minimum wage. I felt a physical wave of nausea reading those words as if he had just insulted my entire lineage. It is genuinely baffling to me that a man with such a limited financial ceiling would even have the audacity to breathe in my digital direction. He actually thought that his good personality could compensate for a bank account that can't even cover my monthly skincare routine. I didn't hold back because someone needed to give this boy a reality check for his own good. I told him straight up that men earning minimum wage are a liability to the social fabric and should focus on overtime rather than dating. It's a matter of basic economics. Why would I devalue my own brand by being seen with someone who shops at discount grocery stores? I explained that a girlfriend is a luxury, not a right, and if he can't provide a high-end lifestyle, he shouldn't be looking for a partner. He had the nerve to say I was being superficial, which is just a word poor people use to cope with their own failures. I was doing him a favor by being honest so he could stop deluding himself and start working harder. The conversation went south quickly when he started talking about human connection and shared values, which are clearly just code for being broke. I laughed and told him that my values include caviar and 5-star resorts, neither of which he could provide on his pathetic salary. I reminded him that a man's only job in a relationship is to be a provider, and a provider of minimum wage is just a glorified roommate. He tried to argue that he was starting out and had potential, but I don't invest in potential. I invest in realized assets. I told him to come back when he had at least 6 figures in his savings, though we both knew that would never happen. I eventually grew bored of his whining and decided to end the conversation with a final, stinging truth about his place in the hierarchy. I told him that people like him are the reason the dating market is so cluttered with low-value noise that keeps high-value women from finding their equals. It is incredibly selfish of men to try and date up when they have absolutely nothing to offer but their presence. My presence is a gift that requires a high entry fee, and if he can't pay the cover charge, he shouldn't be trying to get into the club. Julian then had the audacity to call me delusional and stuck up, which honestly just proved my point about his lack of class. A real man would have apologized for wasting my time and thanked me for the guidance. Instead, he acted like a child who was told he couldn't have a toy he couldn't afford. I decided to block him because I don't need that kind of negative, poverty-stricken energy in my notifications. It's exhausting being the only person with the courage to say what everyone else is thinking about financial standards. I even took a screenshot of our conversation and posted it on my close friends list as a cautionary tale for my girls. We all had a good laugh about how some men really think they can bypass the financial requirements of dating just by being nice. Being nice doesn't pay for a weekend in the Hamptons or a new Birkin, so it's essentially a useless trait in the modern world. I felt empowered knowing I had set a boundary and protected my status from being diluted by a minimum wage intruder. However, the situation took a weird turn when I realized he hadn't just disappeared into the shadows like he was supposed to. A few hours later, I noticed a surge in my request folder from people I didn't know, most of them saying disgusting things. It turns out Julian had screenshotted our entire exchange, including the parts where I explained why he was a social failure, and posted it on a local community page. The caption he wrote was so dramatic, claiming I was everything wrong with society and a parasite. I couldn't believe the nerve of this man to try and expose me for having basic standards and a sense of self-worth. It felt like a direct attack on my right to choose who I associate with based on their economic output. What really bothered me was how everyone in the comments was siding with him as if he were some kind of hero for being poor. They were calling me shallow and elitist like those are bad things when in reality they're just signs of a refined palate. Julian was playing the victim perfectly, soaking up the sympathy of other low achievers who felt triggered by my honesty. I felt like I was being punished for being the only person in the room who wasn't lying to themselves about how the world works. It's not my fault that the truth hurts, and it's certainly not my fault that he chose a career path that pays less than my monthly shoe budget. The whole ordeal was becoming a circus, and I was being cast as the villain just for knowing my worth. By the end of the night, the post had thousands of shares, and my beautiful curated comment section was being flooded by peasants with no profile pictures. I felt like my digital home had been broken into by a mob of people who probably still use public transportation. Julian had successfully turned my desire for a high-quality partner into a public scandal, which is incredibly manipulative if you think about it. He couldn't handle being told no by a woman out of his league, so he decided to try and ruin my reputation. It's just typical low-value behavior to try and tear someone down when you can't reach their level. I went to bed feeling disgusted by the lack of class in the world, wondering why men like him are even allowed to have internet access. Main story comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "You literally ask for his salary before even knowing his last name. That's not having standards, that's being a human price tag. You sound like a nightmare to be around." Up's reply, "It's called efficiency. Why wait until the third date to find out he's broke? My time is worth more than his entire annual income, so I'm just protecting my assets." Anonymous user 2 says, "The irony is that you're worried about your brand while acting like a common gold digger. High-value women usually have their own money and don't need to interrogate strangers like a bank auditor." Up's reply, "I have my own money, which is exactly why I won't date someone who will drain it. I'm an investment, and I require a partner who can match my portfolio, not a charity case." Update 1. 3 days have passed since the peasant uprising on my social media, and the situation has only become more irritating because people simply don't understand nuance. I've had to put my Instagram on private, which is a massive blow to my engagement metrics and potential brand deals for the month. It's truly tragic how one man's bitterness can affect a professional woman's career just because he was offended by a little bit of truth. I spent most of the weekend reporting comments and blocking anyone who looked like they didn't earn at least $50,000 a year. My close friends are still supporting me, but even some of them are acting a bit distant, which is honestly quite traitorous given how much I've inspired them. The local community page where Julian posted the screenshots has refused to take the post down, citing freedom of speech as if that applies to cyberbullying. A high-status woman. I even messaged the admin and offered to pay a removal fee, but they had the audacity to call it a bribe and threatened to post that conversation too. It's clear that I'm dealing with a group of people who have a vendetta against anyone who has achieved a certain level of sophistication. Julian is still basking in his 15 minutes of fame, posting updates about how humbled he is by the support of the community. It's pathetic to see how many people are willing to celebrate mediocrity just because it's wrapped in a nice guy package. To make matters worse, the story was picked up by a local lifestyle blogger who decided to write a think piece on the rise of transactional dating. She used my screenshots without my permission, mind you, to paint a picture of a soulless generation that only cares about money. I was absolutely livid because she didn't mention that I'm also a very spiritual person who aligns her chakras every Tuesday morning. She made me sound like a robot with a spreadsheet instead of a woman who just wants the best for herself and her future children. My future children deserve a father who can provide them with a private education and a summer home in Italy. not someone who thinks a picnic in the park is a valid date. The most stressful part of the week was when I started getting emails at my professional address from people who had tracked down my place of work. I work as a luxury real estate consultant, a job that requires a very specific image of success and exclusivity. If my clients see these screenshots, they might think I'm too aggressive, which is a ridiculous double standard for women in business. My boss, Marcus, called me into his office on Wednesday to ask about the online chatter he had heard through his daughter. I had to spend 20 minutes explaining that I was being targeted by a disgruntled fan who couldn't handle my boundaries. Marcus seemed to buy it, but I could tell he was looking at me differently, which is just another example of how men stick together to suppress high-value women. I decided that the best way to handle this was to lean into my truth and show the world that I won't be intimidated by cancel culture. I posted a story on my private account featuring my latest designer haul with the caption, "Standard unchanged, budget unlimited." It was a bold move, but I needed to remind my remaining followers that I am still the queen of my own castle. Unfortunately, someone from my close friends must be a snake, because that story was leaked within an hour and added to the original viral thread. The backlash was immediate and twice as loud, with people calling me tone-deaf and insufferable. I honestly don't see how celebrating my success is tone-deaf if they're offended by my shopping bags. That's a them problem, not a me problem. Update 1 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "You're really doubling down on the luxury thing while your professional reputation is literally on fire. Read the room, maybe try being a human being for 5 minutes. Ops reply, "My reputation is built on excellence, not on being relatable to people who shop at the clearance rack." I'm not doubling down. I'm simply refusing to shrink myself for the comfort of the poor. Anonymous user 2 says, "The fact that you tried to bribe the admin to take the post down tells us everything we need to know. You think money can fix your lack of character, but clearly it can't." Ops reply, "It wasn't a bribe, it was a professional settlement for a nuisance. If you had any business sense, you'd know that everything has a price except for Julian's future, which is clearly worth 0. Update 2. It has been nearly 2 weeks since Julian decided to ruin my life, and the domino effect I feared is officially in full swing. My office environment has become toxic, not because of me, but because of the petty jealousies of my coworkers who are using this scandal to undermine me. I walked into the break room on Tuesday and caught 2 of the junior agents whispering and laughing while looking at their phones. I know for a fact they were looking at the memes people have made of me, which is incredibly unprofessional for a high-end firm. I reported them to HR for creating a hostile work environment, but the HR manager just gave me a long, tired look and said they would investigate. It's clear that the minimum wage mentality has infected even the corporate levels of my life. The biggest blow came when my primary client, a high net worth individual named Mr. Sterling, suddenly put his search on hold. He was about to close on a $3 million penthouse, and my commission would have easily funded my entire lifestyle for the next 6 months. When I called him to ask why he was stalling, his assistant told me that he was re-evaluating his associations and wanted to work with someone who had a more discreet public profile. I was devastated because I know this is a direct result of Julian's smear campaign in the viral post. Julian didn't just hurt my feelings, he took actual food out of my mouth. Assuming food is a tasting menu at a Michelin star restaurant. It's sickening that a person with no status can have this much power over a professional woman's earnings. I tried to reach out to Mr. Sterling directly to explain that I was a victim of a coordinated harassment campaign by a jealous ex-suitor. I even hinted that Julian might have some mental instabilities just to give my story some more weight and credibility. Mr. Sterling didn't respond to my emails, which is a level of disrespect I haven't faced since I was in college. I've worked so hard to build a bridge to that level of society, and Julian burned it down with a single screenshot. I spent the rest of the day in bed crying into my silk pillowcases because life is just so unfair to people who have high expectations. I don't understand why the world wants to drag me down to Julian's level instead of pushing him to reach mine. To distract myself, I decided to go on a date with a man I met on a high society dating app. Someone who claimed to be a venture capitalist. His name was Sebastian, and on paper he was exactly what I deserved. Rich, ambitious, and aware of the finer things in life. We met at a rooftop bar that requires a membership, And for the first 30 minutes, I felt like I was finally back in my element. I told him all about the harassment I was facing from online trolls who were jealous of my success. Sebastian seemed sympathetic at first, nodding along as I explained why financial compatibility is the cornerstone of any healthy relationship. I felt like I had finally found someone who spoke my language and understood the burden of being exceptional. However, the date took a sharp turn when the bill arrived, and Sebastian suggested we split it because he believes in modern equality. I felt like the world was collapsing all over again. Here was a man who claimed to be a millionaire asking me to pay for my own glass of vintage champagne. I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but his face remained perfectly serious as he handed the waiter his card and looked at me expectantly. I told him that a real gentleman would never ask a woman like me to touch her purse on a first date. He then had the nerve to say he had seen my viral post and figured that since I was so business-minded, I would appreciate a fair transaction. It was a setup, a cruel mockery of my principles, and I was absolutely humiliated in front of the entire staff. I stood up, threw a $100 bill on the table even though my share was only $60, and told him to keep the change for his ventures. I walked out with my head held high, but inside I was boiling with rage at how Julian's post had given men permission to treat me with such disrespect. It's as if my standards are being used as a weapon against me by men who want to humble me. I'm not a transaction, I'm a luxury experience, and the fact that Sebastian couldn't see that just proves he's not as wealthy as he claims to be. Wealthy men don't split bills, only wannabes and posers care about $60. My reputation is being twisted into something ugly, and I'm starting to feel like there's nowhere left for me to go. Update 2 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "So you got humbled by a guy who used your own logic against you? That's not a setup, that's just Sebastian giving you exactly what you asked for, a business transaction." Ops reply, a business transaction in dating means the man provides the capital and the woman provides the prestige. Sebastian failed his part of the contract, which makes him a poor businessman and an even worse date. Anonymous user 2 says losing a $3 million deal because of your Instagram behavior is the ultimate reality check. Maybe focus on being a good agent instead of a luxury experience. Ops reply, I am the best agent in the city, but my clients buy into my lifestyle as much as the property. Julian's low-class drama is the only thing that damaged my professional stand-in, not my own brilliance. Update 3. A full month has passed and I've been forced to take a sabbatical from the firm because Marcus said my presence was distracting the other agents. Distracting is just a polite way of saying that my coworkers were too busy gossiping about me to do their actual jobs. I've been staying at my parents' house in the suburbs, which is a nightmare because their decor is so mid-century mediocre, and there isn't a decent spa within 20 miles. My mother keeps telling me to just apologize to Julian, which is the most offensive thing she's ever said to me. Apologizing to someone like Julian would be like a lion apologizing to a gazelle for having teeth. It's against the natural order of things. The internet hasn't forgotten me either, which is truly a testament to how bored and pathetic most people are with their own lives. There are now video essays on YouTube analyzing my DMs and calling me a symptom of late-stage capitalism. I watched one of them, and the girl in the video was wearing a sweater that looked like it came from a thrift store, so her opinion is obviously invalid. It's funny how people with no money have so much time to talk about how I spend mine. I feel like a political prisoner of the broke-o-sphere, being persecuted for the crime of having an elite mindset. My only solace is that I know I'm still more attractive and successful than 99% of my detractors combined. Last week I decided to try and fix my public image by hiring a boutique PR firm that specializes in reputation management for influencers. The consultant, a woman named Chloe who actually had a decent handbag, told me that I needed to do a poverty-themed photo shoot to show I'm grounded. She suggested I go to a soup kitchen or volunteer at a shelter and post pictures of me connecting with the community. I almost vomited at the suggestion. The idea of touching communal surfaces or being near people who don't use deodorant is genuinely traumatizing. I told Chloe that my brand is luxury, not charity, and that I wouldn't compromise my aesthetic for the sake of a few likes from the masses. The domino effect hit its peak when I received a legal notice from a lawyer representing the People's Forum, the group that runs the local community page. They're suing me for defamation because I told my followers that Julian was a dangerous stalker with mental issues in a moment of frustration. I was just trying to protect myself and my brand, but apparently the truth is litigious when it involves someone's precious reputation. Now I have to spend my savings on a lawyer to defend myself against a man who probably doesn't even own a suit. Julian is literally using the legal system to harass me further, and the minimum wage mob is cheering him on as he drains my resources. I tried to reach out to Julian one last time, not to apologize but to offer him a settlement, to drop the lawsuit and delete the post. I called him from a burner phone so he wouldn't block me, and when he picked up, I could hear the smugness in his voice. I told him I'd give him $5,000, which is like a year's salary, for him to just go away and leave me alone. He laughed in my face and said that some things aren't for sale, which is the biggest lie. Poor people tell themselves to feel superior. He told me he wanted to see the process through to the end so I could learn a lesson about humility. The audacity of this man to try and teach me anything when he can't even afford a decent haircut is staggering. I hung up on him before I said something that would give his lawyer more evidence, but the rage I felt was purely existential. I am being hunted by a man who has nothing to lose, while I have everything at stake. My career, my status, and my future as a social elite. It's a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions where the beautiful and the talented are brought low by the mediocre and the bitter. My bank account is thinning, my friends are gone, and I'm stuck in the suburbs with parents who think Olive Garden is fine dining. I feel like I'm living in a nightmare where the only way out is to admit I was wrong, which is something I am physically incapable of doing because I'm not wrong. Update 3 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "You tried to bribe him again and then called it a settlement? You really haven't learned a single thing this entire month, have you?" Ups reply, "A settlement is a standard legal procedure. I was trying to be generous and help him improve his life with a little bit of capital, but his ego was too big for his tiny wallet." Anonymous user 2 says, "The fact that you're being sued for defamation because you lied about him being a stalker is just poetic justice. You tried to ruin him, and now you're paying the price." Ops reply, "I didn't lie. I provided a subjective interpretation of his aggressive behavior. Julian is the one ruining my life by refusing to accept my financial boundaries." Update 4. It's been 6 months since Julian's DM changed the trajectory of my life, and I'm currently sitting in a tiny studio apartment that doesn't even have a walk-in closet. I had to sell most of my designer collection to pay for the legal fees and the eventual settlement I had to sign to keep myself out of more trouble. The lawsuit was dropped, but at the cost of my entire legacy and the few high-value connections I had left. Marcus officially fired me after the defamation story hit the local news, saying I was a liability to the firm's ethical standards. It's hilarious that a real estate firm cares about ethics when they're selling overpriced glass boxes, but I suppose they needed a scapegoat for their own declining sales. I'm currently working as a receptionist for a mid-tier dental clinic, which is quite literally the lowest point of my existence. I have to smile at people who have cavities and answer phones for a man who wears orthopedic shoes and thinks he's a doctor. Every day I look at the minimum wage earners who walk through the door and I feel a sense of profound, burning resentment. They look so happy with their simple lives and their affordable hobbies, while I'm mourning the loss of my true self. People think I've learned my lesson or that I'm humbled, but they couldn't be more wrong about my mental state. If anything, this experience has only confirmed my belief that the world is a cruel place that hates excellence. Julian actually walked past the clinic last week with a girl who looked like she bought her entire outfit at a supermarket. They were laughing and holding hands, looking like the poster children for contentment in poverty, and it made me want to scream. I stayed hidden behind the reception desk because I couldn't bear the thought of him seeing me in his polyester uniform. He won the battle, sure, but he's still just a junior technician living a small, insignificant life. I might be in a studio apartment now, but my mind is still in a penthouse, and that's something his minimum wage brain will never understand. I refuse to let this world break my spirit or lower my standards, even if I have to eat ramen on a designer plate. I've started a new secret Instagram account where I post luxury mindset quotes and photos of my old life to keep the dream alive. I'm building a new community of high-value women who understand that we are currently being persecuted by a society that prizes mediocrity. We call it the elite resistance, and it's my way of staying connected to the world I belong in. I'm saving every penny of my pathetic paycheck to buy one high-end item every 3 months so I don't lose my touch. I might be filtering my reality more than ever, but that's what it takes to survive in a world full of Julians. One day, I'll find a man who earns what I deserve, and I'll look back at this peasant phase as a test of my loyalty to the top. Until then, I'll continue to look down on everyone who thinks that love or personality is enough to sustain a life. They're all just lying to themselves to avoid the pain of their own insignificance. I'm not a villain. I'm a martyr for the cause of quality, and history will eventually vindicate the women who refuse to settle for less. My nails might not be as long as they used to be, and my coffee might be from a brickroom pot, but my soul is still designer. I'm just a queen in exile waiting for her kingdom to realize its mistake and call her back to the throne. And when that day comes, the first thing I'll do is pass a law making it illegal for anyone with a low credit score to send me a DM.